The Diary in the Attic. In June 15, 1986, a young couple discovers a hidden diary in their Victorian home, unveiling a haunting mystery from the past. June 15, 1986. A day that began like any other in our quaint New England town. I'm Emily, by the way, and this is the story of how my life and my understanding of the world shifted on its very axis. It all started when my husband, Thomas, and I decided to renovate the attic of our newly purchased Victorian house. The house, with its gabled roofs and intricate woodwork, always had an air of mystery about it. We fell in love with its character, oblivious to the secrets it harbored. That morning, as I climbed the creaky wooden ladder into the attic, dust motes danced in the beams of sunlight filtering through the small window. The attic was a time capsule, filled with forgotten furniture covered in white sheets, like silent ghosts waiting in the shadows. While Thomas busied himself prying open an old chest, I was drawn to a corner where the wall met the sloping roof. There, partially hidden under a loose floorboard, was a small, leather-bound book. Its cover was worn, the leather cracked with age, and a faded name was etched in the corner. Abigail. Curiosity piqued, I sat cross-legged on the dusty floorboards, gently opening the diary. The first entry was dated 1885, the elegant script speaking of a time long gone. Abigail wrote about her life, her family, her excitement at turning 13, and the little joys and sorrows of her days. Her words painted a vivid picture of a bygone era, and I felt like a voyeur, peering into the soul of a girl who once lived within these very walls. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the attic, I read on. Something about Abigail's writing captivated me. It was as if her youthful spirit leaped off the pages, her hopes and dreams so palpable, so real. But as I turned the pages, a subtle change began to creep into her words. Whispers of strange noises in the night, objects seemingly moving on their own, and a growing sense of unease. Her once carefree entries grew heavier with each passing day, a sense of foreboding seeping through her words. I shivered, despite the warmth of the summer afternoon. "Emily, look at this," Thomas called out, snapping me back to the present. But my mind was already ensnared, caught in the web of Abigail's story, a story that was now, inexplicably, becoming a part of our own. Hey, quick reminder, don't forget to subscribe and like for more videos. The next few days, I found myself irresistibly drawn to Abigail's diary. Thomas would leave for his job at the local library, and I'd ascend to the attic, the diary waiting like a silent confidant. I was becoming a part of Abigail's world, a world frozen in time yet so full of life in her words. March 12, 1885, Abigail wrote about her birthday, the joy in her words leaping off the page. She described her dress, sky blue with lace trimmings, and the way her mother's smile lit up the room. She talked about her father's gift, a beautifully crafted locket, and her brother's playful teasing. It was as though I could hear the laughter, see the flickering candles on her cake, and feel the happiness that filled their home. Her early entries were windows into daily life in the late 19th century. She wrote about school, her friends, the changing seasons, and the small adventures that colored her days. She talked about the town, its cobbled streets, the new clock tower, and the excitement of the upcoming summer fair. Abigail's world was vivid and real. I found myself wondering about the street she walked, the people she knew. Did they know then that a young girl's words would survive the passage of time, offering a glimpse into a past, long gone? As spring turned to summer in her diary, a subtle shift occurred. Abigail started mentioning odd occurrences around the house. It began innocuously enough. A feeling of being watched, a fleeting shadow from the corner of her eye, a cold draft in an otherwise warm room. June 7th, she wrote about a peculiar incident. Her favorite doll, which she had placed on her dresser, was found on the floor by the window the next morning. She thought little of it, attributing it to her forgetfulness. But these small, unexplainable events began to happen more frequently. Her diary entries reflected her growing unease. I could almost sense her confusion and fear, as if they were seeping out of the pages. She wrote about whispering voices in the dead of night, so faint she wasn't sure if they were real or just a trick of her imagination. Once, she woke up to find her room much colder than usual, an inexplicable chill that made her shiver. These entries, once filled with the exuberance of youth, started to bear the weight of her anxiety. Her words, once carefree, were now tinged with apprehension. As I read on, a chill ran down my spine, mirroring the fear that must have gripped her. July 14th. The tone of her entries changed drastically. She spoke of a dream, vivid and unsettling, where she found a hidden room in the house. In her dream, this room was dark, the walls adorned with strange symbols she couldn't understand. She woke up with a start, her heart pounding, convinced for a moment that the room was real. I closed the diary, a sense of foreboding settling over me. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the attic. Downstairs, the house creaked as it settled for the night, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Abigail's story was more than just a forgotten page in history. Her fear, her confusion, they felt too real, too close. As I left the attic, I couldn't help but glance over my shoulder, half expecting to see something or someone watching from the shadows. As July melted into August, the diary's narrative took a darker turn, mirroring the oppressive heat of the summer. The light-hearted tales of village fetes and sun-dappled afternoons were gradually eclipsed by entries that spoke of shadows lurking in the corners of Abigail's world. August 3rd's entry was etched with a palpable sense of dread. Abigail described a recurring nightmare where she wandered through endless corridors of our house, each room leading to another, each more disorienting than the last. The dream always ended in the mysterious unexplored room, its door just out of reach. Each time she described this dream, her words trembled with a silent scream, an unvoiced terror that seemed to leap off the page and settle around me in the dusty attic. The diary began to reveal more unsettling events. Objects in the house moved inexplicably. Her cherished locket disappeared for days, only to be found in the most unlikely of places. The sound of footsteps echoed through empty hallways at night. Abigail's writing grew more frantic. The elegant script now rushed, as if she penned her thoughts in haste, a desperate attempt to document her growing unease. One entry, dated August 15th, spoke of whispers in the darkness, voices that called her name. She described sitting up in bed, straining to hear, but the words were always just beyond comprehension, as elusive as the shadows that danced at the edge of her vision. Her family noticed her distress, but attributed it to an overactive imagination, a phase she would soon outgrow. I could almost feel the isolation that Abigail must have felt, her experiences dismissed, her fears unacknowledged. In her writings, I sensed a deepening despair, a feeling of being trapped in her own home, a place that should have been her sanctuary. By late August, the tone of the diary had shifted entirely. The entries became sporadic, the once daily musings now appearing once every few days, each more disturbed than the last. Abigail wrote of a growing sense of something sinister within the walls of the house, a malevolent presence that seemed to be closing in on her. August 23rd's entry was particularly harrowing. She described an evening when the house was unusually quiet, the silence so heavy it was almost suffocating. As she lay in bed, the stillness was shattered by a sudden, loud knock from within the wall behind her headboard. Frozen in terror, she lay there, listening as the knocking continued, rhythmic and persistent, as if something or someone was trying to break through. Reading these entries in the dim light of the attic, a chill crept up my spine. I couldn't help but glance nervously around the shadowy corners, half expecting to see a pair of eyes staring back at me. I tried to convince myself that it was just a young girl's overactive imagination, but something in the pit of my stomach told me it was more than that. There was a truth hidden in her words, a reality that transcended time, reaching out from the past into my present. As I closed the diary for the day, the silence of our own house seemed to press in around me, a silent witness to the unfolding story of Abigail's descent into fear. September had arrived, bringing with it a chill that seeped into the bones of the old house. Abigail's entries, once filled with the mundane beauty of everyday life, now read like a chronicle of creeping dread. Her words, shaky and rushed, spoke of a discovery that would forever alter the fabric of her world. It was a rainy September evening when Abigail ventured into the rarely used west wing of the house, drawn by a curiosity that overpowered her fear. In her diary, she described the hallway as if seeing it for the first time, the portraits on the walls watching her with silent, accusing eyes. She found a door, one she had passed by countless times before, but on this night it stood slightly ajar, beckoning. With a mix of trepidation and resolve, she pushed the door open. The room beyond was shrouded in dust and shadows, untouched by time. Abigail wrote of the oppressive air, thick with the scent of old wood and something else, something she couldn't name. The walls were lined with bookshelves, heavy tomes covered in dust, their titles indecipherable in the dim light. In the center of the room stood a large desk, cluttered with papers and strange artifacts that Abigail couldn't identify. She described a feeling of being watched, of unseen eyes following her every move. Her heart raced as she sifted through the papers, finding old letters written in a language she didn't recognize and diagrams that made her skin crawl. The most unsettling discovery, however, lay in a small locked drawer. Abigail wrote of finding a key hidden under a stack of papers, its metal cold to the touch. With trembling hands, she unlocked the drawer, revealing its contents, a collection of small, intricately carved figurines, each depicting grotesque, contorted figures, and a worn, leather-bound journal, much like her own. She hesitated before opening the journal, a sense of foreboding washing over her. The pages were filled with writings about rituals and ceremonies, dark practices that chilled her to the bone. She realized with a growing horror that her family was involved in something sinister, something that transcended the boundaries of the natural world. That night, Abigail's entry ended abruptly, her writing trailing off into an unsteady scrawl. I sat in the attic, the diary open on my lap, the words blurring before my eyes. My mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of a story that seemed too fantastic, too eerie to be real. Yet, the diary in my hands was proof of its reality. The fear that had gripped Abigail was now seeping into my own heart, a cold, unyielding presence. I couldn't shake the feeling that the discovery of this hidden room had set into motion events that Abigail could neither control nor understand. As I closed the diary, the wind outside picked up, rattling the windows of the attic. The house creaked and groaned as if awakening from a long slumber, and I couldn't help but wonder what secrets it still held, what stories were etched into its walls. Abigail's world and mine were intertwining, the past reaching out to the present, and I knew that I could no longer remain a passive observer. The truth lay hidden within these walls, and I was determined to uncover it. As the days shortened and the leaves began to turn, my connection to Abigail's world deepened, each entry unveiling more of the haunting mystery that had consumed her life. But it was an unexpected discovery of my own that sent a new shiver of fear down my spine, binding me even closer to her story. It was a crisp October afternoon when I decided to explore the attic further, propelled by a nagging sense that something was waiting to be uncovered. Amidst the relics of the past, I stumbled upon an old, dust-covered box. Its contents were mundane at first glance, a collection of old letters, photographs faded by time, and a small reel-to-reel tape recorder, its leather casing cracked and worn. Curiosity piqued. I took the recorder downstairs, finding it strangely heavy in my hands. After some tinkering, it whirred to life, the reels slowly turning as a crackling, static-filled sound filled the room. Thomas, intrigued, joined me as we listened intently. What we heard next was unsettling. A voice, faint and distorted, emerged from the static. It was a woman's voice, trembling with emotion, speaking about a ritual, a family secret that had to be hidden from the world. The words were choppy, some lost in the hiss of the tape, but the terror in her voice was unmistakable. It ended abruptly, the silence afterward more chilling than the recording itself. The voice, I was certain, was Abigail's mother. The fear that had trembled in her words mirrored the fear I had seen in Abigail's diary entries. It was as if the tape had captured a moment of profound dread, a snapshot of a family on the brink of something dark and unfathomable. That night, I returned to the diary, my hands shaking slightly as I turned the pages. Abigail's entries from around the time of the recording spoke of her mother's growing anxiety, her hushed conversations with Abigail's father, and the nights she spent locked in her study, the same room where Abigail had found the disturbing journal. I couldn't help but draw parallels between Abigail's increasingly frantic writings and the desperate tone of her mother's voice on the tape. It was as if the diary and the recording were two pieces of the same puzzle, each shedding light on a family caught in a web of occult practices and unspeakable secrets. As I lay in bed that night, The house settling around me, I couldn't escape the feeling that we were not alone, that the echoes of the past were resonating through the walls of our home. The diary and the recording had opened a door to something that refused to remain buried in history. I knew then that the story was far from over, that the shadows that had haunted Abigail were reaching out to us, beckoning us deeper into the mystery that had consumed her life. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that we had to uncover the truth, no matter how terrifying it might be. As autumn's embrace tightened around our old Victorian home, the line between the past and the present blurred, each day bringing us closer to the heart of Abigail's haunting narrative. It was during one particularly stormy October evening that our search for answers reached a crescendo, unveiling truths long buried in the shadows. Driven by an unyielding sense of purpose, Thomas and I scoured the house, following the ghostly trail Abigail's diary had laid out. Our quest led us to the West Wing, the same wing Abigail had ventured into over a century ago. There, hidden behind a heavy, dust-laden tapestry, we found it. A door, inconspicuous, its paint cracked and peeling, much like the one Abigail had described in her frantic entries. With bated breath, we pushed the door open. A musty, cold air greeted us, as if exhaling years of secrecy and silence. The room was a mirror to Abigail's descriptions. A large, imposing desk sat in the center, its surface littered with ancient tomes and parchments, their edges yellowed with age. The walls were lined with shelves, each filled with odd trinkets and artifacts, their purposes as obscure as the room itself. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I approached the desk, the same desk where Abigail had found her family's darkest secrets. Among the clutter, I found a journal, its leather cover cracked and worn, identical to the one Abigail had described. As I flipped through its pages, a sense of dread washed over me. The writings, in a spidery, archaic script, detailed rituals and ceremonies of a nature so dark they seemed to leap off the page and slither around the room. Thomas, meanwhile, had discovered a series of old faded photographs. They depicted the room, the family, and the strange gatherings that must have taken place within these walls. In these photos, I saw Abigail, her eyes wide with fear, a silent witness to the horrors that unfolded around her. As we delved deeper into the room's secrets, the storm outside grew more violent, the wind howling like a chorus of lost souls. It felt as though the house itself was reacting to our discovery, the past screaming into the present. It was then that we found the hidden drawer, just as Abigail had described. Inside lay the small, intricately carved figurines, each a grotesque representation of something both human and not. Their eyes seemed to follow us, whispering of unspeakable acts committed in the pursuit of forbidden knowledge. The revelation was overwhelming. Our home, once a symbol of our future, had become a nexus of a tormented past. Abigail's diary had led us to this moment, unearthing a history so dark, it threatened to consume us in its shadows. That night, as we sat in our living room, the diary and the contents of the hidden room laid out before us, we knew our lives had irrevocably changed. Abigail's spirit, and the spirits of those entwined in this macabre history, lingered in the house, their stories etched into its very fabric. We were no longer mere residents of this house. We had become guardians of its dark legacy, custodians of a truth that needed to be brought into the light. The diary had ceased to be just a relic of the past. It was a living testament to a tragedy that had unfolded within these walls. And we knew, with a clarity that was almost frightening, that we had to find a way to bring peace to Abigail, to release her from the chains of her family's sins. The storm outside raged on, mirroring the turmoil within us as we prepared to face whatever lay ahead, armed with the knowledge that some secrets, once unearthed, change everything. The revelations of the hidden room left Thomas and me encircled in a web of ancient mysteries and unquiet spirits, the weight of history pressing heavily upon our shoulders. As the leaves outside our Victorian home turned from gold to brown, we knew we had to act, to untangle the threads of the past that bound us. Our resolve led us to seek the aid of Mrs. Aldridge, a local historian with a deep understanding of the town's hidden narratives, and Madame Lefebvre, a medium known for her sensitivity to the echoes of the other world. Together, we formed a circle of light in the darkness that had enveloped our home. On a cold November night, under the watchful eye of the waning moon, we gathered in the hidden room. The air was thick with anticipation, the shadows seeming to lean in, listening. Madame Lefebvre's voice, a soft and steady cadence, called out to the spirits bound within these walls. We asked for understanding, for peace, for release. The response was almost immediate. A gust of wind swirled around the room, pages of the old journal flipping wildly. The figurines on the desk trembled, as if awakening from a long slumber. And then, there she was, Abigail, a faint apparition shimmering in the candlelight, her eyes wide with a century of unspoken fears. Her voice was a mere whisper, yet it filled the room, resonating with a sorrow that transcended time. She spoke of her family's descent into darkness, of rituals performed in the name of power, and of her own unwilling entanglement in their sinister web. Her spirit, she revealed, was anchored to this world by the secrets and sins of her lineage. Madame Lefebvre guided us, her words weaving a path for Abigail towards release. We acknowledged her pain, her fear, and the injustice she had endured. We offered forgiveness, not just from ourselves, but on behalf of the world that had forgotten her. As the ceremony reached its climax, a sense of peace began to descend upon the room. The oppressive air lifted, replaced by a feeling of gentle release. Abigail's spirit, her form growing ever fainter, smiled, a gesture of gratitude and relief. With a final whisper of thanks, she faded away, her presence leaving the room, leaving our world free at last. In the days that followed, our home felt different, lighter, as if a heavy shroud had been lifted. The strange occurrences ceased, the whispers in the night silenced. We knew that Abigail's spirit had found peace, her story finally told, her pain acknowledged and released. We decided to document our experience, to preserve Abigail's diary and the findings from the hidden room. The local historical society accepted these relics, ensuring that her story, once buried in the shadows of time, would be remembered. As winter blanketed our town in snow, Thomas and I looked upon our home with new eyes. It was no longer just a structure of wood and stone. It was a testament to a journey through the veils of time, a bridge between the living and the forgotten. We had become part of its history, custodians of its secrets and its redemption. Our lives had been irrevocably altered, woven into the tapestry of this old house's legacy. We had faced the unknown, guided by the whispering echoes of the past, and emerged with a profound understanding of the delicate balance between light and shadow, between memory and oblivion. As winter's frost thawed into the gentle bloom of spring, our home, once a bastion of hidden fears and silent screams, now resonated with a newfound tranquility. The journey Thomas and I embarked upon, driven by the haunting echoes of Abigail's diary, had culminated in an unexpected catharsis, not only for the lost soul we had freed, but for ourselves as well. In the wake of our spectral adventure, our once ordinary lives had transformed, as if we had awoken from a long, oblivious slumber to the profound intricacies of the world around us. The house, with its Victorian charm and labyrinthine corridors, now felt like a living entity, its walls whispering stories of the past, each creak and groan a language we had learned to understand and respect. Spring in our New England town brought not only a resurgence of life, but a renewal of purpose for us. The local historical society, where we had placed Abigail's diary and the other artifacts, became a place of frequent visitation. The townspeople, initially skeptical, gradually came to embrace the story of our home. They would listen, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination, as we recounted our journey into the depths of the unknown. Thomas and I found ourselves becoming unofficial historians, guardians of the forgotten lore that our town had unknowingly harbored. We organized small exhibitions, talks, and even a walking tour, tracing the steps of Abigail's life and our journey to uncover the truth. It was a way to honor her memory, to ensure that her voice, once stifled by time and shadows, continued to resonate. Our home, too, had become somewhat of a local curiosity. No longer the subject of wary glances and hushed whispers. It stood proudly, its history embraced, its mysteries unveiled. We welcomed visitors, sharing with them not only the story of Abigail but the rich tapestry of lives that had woven through its rooms over the centuries. In the quiet moments, when the last of the day's light would filter through the stained glass windows, casting kaleidoscopic patterns across the walls, Thomas and I would often reflect on our journey. We pondered the fragility of time, the echoes of the past that linger in the present, and the unseen threads that connect us all. Our nights were no longer haunted by the unknown. Instead, they were filled with a peaceful silence, a comforting blanket that enveloped the house. Sometimes, in the stillness, I thought I could hear a faint melody, like a distant lullaby, a whisper of gratitude from the world beyond. As the seasons turned, our story, entwined with that of Abigail's, became a new chapter in the house's legacy. It stood as a testament to the enduring power of memory and the resilience of the human spirit. Now, as I sit by the window, penning these final words, the garden blooming outside, I realize that our journey was more than a quest into the shadows of the past. It was a pilgrimage towards understanding, a bridge built between the living and the ethereal, a dance with the delicate balance of life, death, and redemption. In freeing Abigail, we had found a deeper freedom, a connection to the intricate tapestry of existence that extends beyond the physical realm. Our home, once a repository of hidden fears, now resonated with a serene wisdom, a quiet guardian of the past, present, and future. And so our story ends, but the echoes of its melody linger, a symphony of life and time that continues to play, softly, persistently, in the heart of our home, in the whispers of the wind, in the echoes of serenity. We have come to the end of our story. Subscribe and like the video so as not to miss the videos that we will upload in the future. Tell me, what do you think about this story in the comments? I'll see you in the next story.